Carolina Realtors webinar series. I'm Rusty Johnson, your host. Thanks for being here. Thanks for spending your St. Patrick's Day with me. If you don't have on green, pinch yourself. Also, thanks for spending your lunch hour with me today. We're going to have some fun today, okay? First of all, logistics, make sure your phones are off. Everybody that's watching on the webinar series from your computers or your laptops, make sure you know that at the end of the presentation, we're going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes answering any questions that you might have. And let's talk about why we're here today. Why we're here is we want you to get more listings in 2011. I want you to sell more listings. I want you to make more people happy, make more past clients that are going to send you referrals. And I want you to make some more money in 2011. So that's what I'm going to do to help you. We're handling stalls and objections. That's what we're talking about with seller prospects that you work with. What I want you to be able to do is I want you to understand first and foremost that objections are normal. I want you to expect them. If you expect them and you learn from me today the techniques that you can use to handle those objections, you'll feel more comfortable in front of your clients. The reason that I want you to expect them is because you have to understand that with seller prospects, you're handling one of the largest decisions of their lives. What that means is it's a big decision for them. They don't do this every day like you or I. Also, if you're in a listing presentation with those clients, they are only going to have about an hour to an hour and a half to make a big decision in a short period of time. So you have to get their trust in a very short period of time. And the last thing is selling a house is an unknown for most people, which means unknown means that they are fearful. They don't know what to expect. So they're naturally going to have some objections. What I'm going to do today is, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you some tools that you can use to handle those objections when they come up. And I want you to be able to make these seller prospects feel a lot more comfortable with you, because if they feel comfortable with you, they're going to sign the paperwork at the end of your listing presentation. You're going to get that listing. Okay? So, first and foremost, let's make sure that we've got the technology working, and we do. As I said in the beginning, my name's Rusty Johnson. I am a graduate of Wofford College. By the way, if any of you are keeping up with the NCAA basketball tournament, Wofford plays tonight at 7 p.m. on CBS against, of all people, the number 3 ranked team in the nation, BYU. So we will have a short-lived venture in the bracket. But that's okay. I'm still going to pull for them. I have been a realtor in Columbia for 17 years, which means that I've listed a lot of houses. I list anywhere from 40 to 50 houses a year. And I also work with residential clients as well as commercial clients. And I'm also a trainer and coach for our company. I train in the listing consultation process. I train on how to do a real estate business plan. I train in handling objections, which is what we're going to go over today. I also train in productivity coaching, and I train in the Top Producer 8i web-based real estate program, which reminds me that we need to talk about that. So let's start with, you've heard a little bit about me, let's start with what a stall is. Webster says that a stall is to come to a standstill, be brought to a complete stop. In the real estate business, a stall is what the prospect says to hide for whatever real reason they don't feel like they make a decision today. That's a stall. Okay? Now, if you want to take a guess, what is the most common type of stall? Anybody want to guess? Most common type of stall is we want to think it over. We need to think about it. Okay? Now, what I'm about to tell you is when you're overcoming these stalls and objections with the techniques I'm going to give you today, the goal here is to make sure that the seller feels comfortable so that they'll sign with you, right? But the ultimate goal is to make sure that your objection handling technique that you use is not argumentative. It's not confrontational. Okay? Keep that in mind as we go through what we go through today. In this case, your real job is going to be to find the real objection. Why are they stalling? What's the real reason behind that? Now, an objection is defined by Webster's as a statement presented in opposition. Now, that word opposition is kind of strong, which means two forces coming together and wanting to stop something. Don't think of it that way. Think of it as they have a real reason that they don't feel like they should make a decision today. In other words, they have something that's gone unanswered or something they feel uncomfortable about, something that you have not answered for them yet. So you've got to get to the bottom of what that is. And there's a track that I'm going to show you to follow to do that. Your goal is to change their feelings by eliminating their fear. And it's going to be logical. It's going to sound like it makes sense when I show you these techniques today. It's not going to be, well, you'd be a dummy to think that way. How many listing presentations are you going to go on and say that and get the listing? This many. None. Okay? All right. Let's start with the basics. There's 7 truths for objection handling. The first one is, objection handling is not scientific. Do something as opposed to sitting there like a deer in the headlights. Okay? What you show the prospect is less important than you doing something. Okay? Now, if you expect these to come up, they're not going to be a surprise to you, and I'm going to give you the techniques to handle them today so you will be able to do something. The next truth in objection handling is handle it only when it's necessary. Don't pull out a bazooka when a pistol will work. Thank you for that, Earl King, one of my trainers. When do you need to handle the objection? Sometimes before they occur, sometimes later on, sometimes as it occurs, sometimes never. You may actually handle their objection or their potential objection during the course of the listing presentation. You might actually answer their question before they ask it. The number 3 truth of objection handling is there are 285 million objection handling techniques. We're going to cover them all today. No, not really. That's a facetious number. It's just that there's a lot of different techniques. Objection handling tools are used to change people's feelings when they want to procrastinate. I'm going to give you several today, but you won't have to use quite that many. Another truth. Oops, can I go back on that, please? Thank you. Most objection handling techniques don't work most of the time, but they all work some of the time. So when you get these techniques today, just put them in your toolbox and pull them out at the appropriate time and use them. And number 5 of the 7 truths of objection handling is some prospects just need a nudge. Oh, come on, just sign it. Depending on the personality of the seller prospect that you're working with, that may be the one thing that they need to go ahead and sign the paperwork and list their home for sale with you. Oh, come on, just go ahead and sign it. All right? And number 6, this is my favorite one. The attempt will get you farther than the actual objection handling technique. Better to have tried and failed than have never tried at all. And here's the last one. This is another very important one. It's not necessarily the objection handling technique that I give you that's going to actually handle the objection. It's the track that you follow. Now, what I want you to do is I want you guys at home or in your training rooms or at your computers, I want you to write down this track right now, because I'm going to go back to it over and over and over again as I do these objection handling techniques for you. There will be different techniques for handling different objections, but the track for every one of them is the same. Okay? That track starts off with agreeing with them. What did I say a moment ago? I said a moment ago that this is not meant to be argumentative. It's not meant to be confrontational. You're wanting to get rid of a fear that they have, an unanswered question that they have, by giving them a logical answer to something that's a genuine concern of theirs. You're wanting them to feel, as one of my friends, Mike Taylor, used to say, all warm and fuzzy about you. So you agree with them. It's like a big, big inflated balloon that has this objection, and when you say, I agree, that's a legitimate concern, that balloon's going to go and deflate. They're going to get more comfortable, right? Then, after you agree with them, I want you to rephrase their objection. Say it back to them. The reason for that, guys, is because you want them to have a feeling that you have a clear understanding of their objection. In other words, if it's important to you as the realtor, it's going to be, if it's important to you, excuse me, I said that wrong. If it's important to them, it's got to be important to you. So you got to rephrase it to let them know how important it is to you. Does that make sense? Rephrasing it lets them know that you understood them completely, okay? Now, here's the key statement in every objection handling technique I'm going to give you. What if I show you ... Will you or will ya? Okay? Now, here's the point about the track. When you say that question to a seller prospect, don't say anything else. Wait on an answer. And I'll tell you what the most common question you're going to get after you say that is going to be. It's going to be, how are you going to do that, Rusty? That's going to be the most common question you're going to get, but I don't want you to answer it. I want you to say, no, 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 me first. If I show you, will you? Okay? Keep that in mind. And then you're going to actually show them with the technique I'm going to give you today. Okay? And once you show them, I want you to put 2 stars by that last section of the track, which is close them for a decision. You can't say, there's the door. You've got to say, why don't you go ahead and walk through that door? Close them for a decision. Give them something proactive to do. Push the paperwork in front of them and say, press hard, cheap carbon paper. Okay? That's the close. All right? So, let's talk about the most common objections that you're going to hear. There's 7 of them. The first one, we want a higher price. I very seldom go on a seller's listing appointment with a seller client and he says, no, Rusty, that's plenty of money for me. They almost always want more money. The second one is, another agent offered me a lower commission. Well, that's also net, isn't it? That's also net proceeds. That's also money. And so's the third one. We want to list our home with a discount broker. That's money. The top 3 objections that you're going to hear from every seller prospect are going to be money related. If you have the objection handling technique and you follow the track that I just showed you a moment ago, you'll overcome that, relieve them of their fear, and then they'll want to list with you. The fourth one is we have friends in the real estate business. The fifth one is we want to list our home for only 60 days. Then the sixth one is, I love this one because I do a lot of training for first-year real estate agents at my company, Keller Realty. I've only been in the business a year. Wait, that's my favorite one right there. And then the 7th one is more or less a stall, as we talked about a moment ago. We want to think about it. So let's go over these one at a time, following the track that you wrote down first. The first objection that you get is, we want a higher price. What's the first thing that you say? The first thing you say is, I agree. I agree. And then you need to rephrase it for clarity. So what you're saying, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is the net proceeds is not going to be high enough. Is that right? Yes. Get them saying yes. When you rephrase it, it helps them see that you understand their fear or their objection. Okay? And then what I want you to do is, following the track, I want you to say this. What if I show you where we can net you that higher figure? Will you go ahead and list with me tonight? Now remember what I said when I described the track. You have to say that. That's going to make your gutsy meter peg a little bit, right? Does that make you a little nervous whenever you say something like that? Because you're putting them in a corner. You're closing them for a decision. If I show you where you can net that number tonight, will you list with me? And the first thing they're going to say is what? How are you going to do that? Remember I told you a minute ago when I described the track? Don't let them say that. Well, you can let them say that, but don't answer it. No, me first. If I show you, will you list with me tonight? Yes. Well, then you have to show them. Okay? Now, here's your objection handling track right here. And I'm going to use a $200,000 home as an example for our discussions today, okay? Most of the time, you can equate the additional net proceeds that they need to a percentage of the sales price. In other words, if they needed another $2,000, that's just 1%, right? Right? So your objection handling technique is, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the way I'm going, and remember, by the way, net proceeds is based on sales price, not list price. Does everybody understand that? In other words, what you list it for is not going to be what it sells for. Nobody pays full sticker price for a car. They don't pay full sticker price for a house either. Okay, so get them to understand that it's based on the sales price. There's several different objection handling techniques you can handle. We want a higher price. One is, well, why don't we just list it for $2,000 higher? If I show you, will you? Would you be at a listing presentation where, by the way, according to the National Association of Realtors, if you get to the front door, you've got a 75% chance of getting the listing just by getting to the front door? Okay? Would you let that listing opportunity go away for an additional $2,000 on the list price? No, probably not. I know I'm not going to. If you need an extra $2,000, then, okay, I'll list it for $202. Because I know that later on, if I don't have any showings, if I don't have any offers, I'm probably going to be able to solicit a price reduction from the seller client, okay? But I'm not going to let a $2,000 difference keep me from getting the listing. That's one objection handling technique that you can use. Now, when you say that, what if we list it for $202,000, then that'll net you what you need to net. Here's what I want you to say, because this is also part of your track after you show them. You've got to close them for a decision. What's the close here? That makes sense, doesn't it? You're netting what you need to net. You said you'd list with me if I netted you that. Here's the paperwork. Press hard. It's cheap carbon. So what you've got to be, and this is very tough here, because in objection handling techniques, you feel like you're cornering them. You feel like you're pressuring them. Nobody wants to be disliked, and nobody wants to feel like they're high pressure. Why do you think most people go to the car lot on a Sunday? Because the salespeople aren't there, and they're not going to be pressured, right? That's why they do that. But you're going to have to do that if you've spent the last hour and a half going through a listing presentation with this person only to get the listing. That's the only reason you're there. So you've got to handle these objections. You said you needed $2,000 more. Here's how I'm going to get it for you. Let's get going. So that's one way to handle we need a higher price. Okay? Now, you're going to have to make a business decision at some point when they say that we want a higher price of whether or not you're willing to list it that much higher. Because remember, in the real estate business as listing agents, it's our money that we spend up front, in advance, to market, advertise, and promote a home. And if you list an overpriced listing, it's actually costing you money. Irrespective of what other people may have told you, it's costing you money to list an overpriced listing. So be aware that there's going to be a limit to how much higher you're willing to go to still get the listing, recognizing that you may be able to get price reductions later. Okay? Yes? Questions at the end? Okay. Thank you. Write it down, though, so you don't forget it. Okay. All right. So that's one way to handle we need a higher price. Now, let's talk about the second one, which is another agent offer me a lower commission. That's one of my favorite ones. Our company policy at Keller Williams Realty, and we're not going to talk about commissions because we're not going to set commissions for anybody, but it's a fact that our company policy at Keller Williams is the commission is 7% of the sales price, whatever that ends up being, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you decide. Okay? And it's always a 50-50 split of commissions in our market, 3.5% on the list side, 3.5% on the buyer side. Okay? So what you want to do is, if the seller throws up that objection as, another agent offered us a lower commission, if they throw up that objection, what's the first thing that you say? I agree. I agree. I agree. And then you want to rephrase it. So what you're saying is, by paying a lower commission, let me make sure that I understand you. What you're saying is, by paying a lower commission, you'll actually net more. Is that right? And they're going to say, yes, that's right. Well, then your third step of your track is, what if I show you where paying a lower commission might prevent the house from selling? Now get that. What if I show you where by paying a lower commission, let's say it was a 6% commission instead of the 7% commission that our company charges, just as an example. What if I show you by paying a 6% commission instead of a 7% commission, the home probably won't sell? Now what's the first thing they're going to say? How are you going to show me that? No, me first. Me first. If I show you where listing it at a lower commission is going to keep it from selling, will you still want to do that? Well, no, Rusty, we brought you here for a reason. We've got to move. Okay? Now you've got to show them, and here's how you show them. Everybody in the real estate business, there's several ways that you can show them this. Everybody in the real estate business knows that in the multiple listing service, the compensation to the selling broker is listed, right? Everybody knows that. Take a few listings as examples from the multiple listing service to take with you on your listing presentation so that you can show your seller prospect this. Highlight it on the sheet. Here are 3 homes in your area, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that are the same price as we're planning on listing your home tonight. One of them offers a 3% commission to the selling broker. One of them offers a 3.5% commission to the selling broker. And by the way, here's one that's offering a 4% commission to the selling broker. Now, here's what I want you to do, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, and I do this all the time with seller prospects that I list. And remember, I list 40 or 50 houses a year. I lay them out on the table, and I say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, think like a real estate agent for just a minute. You're an agent. You have a buyer that wants to look at one of these 3 houses. Which one would you like to show first? Because they're all the same price, and they're all in your area. And I can tell you right now, conclusively, inevitably, guess which one they pick? The 4%. Now, here's where you have to be very careful. The very next thing I say to the seller prospect after they say that is, let me explain something to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. This is not the way that I work, because it's not. It's not the way I work. I match the buyer to the home when I'm representing buyers, not the buyer to the commission, okay? So make sure you qualify that statement to let them know that this is not the way you work. But there are a number of real estate agents out there who do match the buyer to the commission they will get as a result of selling the home. That's a fact. I don't know the percentage, I don't know the number, but I know that it's a fact that there are agents that are tempted by a higher commission to show it more. In the case of you listing at a 6% commission, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, your co-broker commission is going to be 3. Whereas if you list with me and Keller Williams tonight, your co-broker commission is going to be 3.5. Which home would you sell? Now, the other thing that you have to do as a caveat to that is you have to explain to them that in our market, 90% of the transactions are co-brokered. That means that although I might be the agent that lists it for sale, there's going to be another agent 9 times out of 10 that ends up representing your buyer. The reason for that's because there's about 1,800 agents licensed in our multiple listing service. Does that sound right? 1,800? What are my chances of being the guy that represents the seller and the buyer? Well, 1 in 1,800. This isn't rocket science. Okay? You need to explain that to them. Remember what I said earlier. They don't do this for a living like you and I do, but if they understand the logistics of a typical real estate transaction where 90% of the homes that are sold by another agent, the best way to tempt them to help sell your home is with a what? Higher commission. There's a chance it won't sell if you list it at 6, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. That makes sense, doesn't it? There's your close. Or you can say, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Just say that makes sense, doesn't it? Because you want to keep them saying yes. Don't say, you don't want to do that, do you? That's a no. Get them saying yes. That makes sense, doesn't it? So we want to list it that way, don't we? Get them saying yes. Okay? Now, there's another technique that you can use if they say that they want to list it with another broker that's offering a lower commission, or if they want to list it with a discount broker. Now, I think discount brokers are great, by the way. If I ever list my home for sale, I'm just like every other seller in the city of Columbia. I want to save money too. I want to maximize my net proceeds too. And the best way to do that is to hire a broker that's not going to charge as much of a commission, because the commission is the largest contributor to the subtraction from their net proceeds or their equity, right? So what you want to do is you want to say this graciously. Don't be the unprofessional who badmouths the competition. That makes you look bad. What you want to say is Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I agree with you. Listing with a discount broker is a good idea. And then rephrase it so that they understand that it's important to you too. Let me make sure that I understand you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. The reason that you want to list with a discount broker is because they'll charge you a lower commission, and ultimately you'll be able to net more. Is that right? Yes, that's right. Then you have to do the what if I. What if I show you by listing with a discount broker it may not sell? You might save the whole 4%. A lot of discount brokers charge 4%, right? 4% total commission. If they tell you they're thinking of listing it with a discount broker at 4%, what if I show you where listing it with a discount broker it may not sell? Well, how are you going to do that, Rusty? No, me first. If I show you, will you list with me tonight? Well, we got to sell, Rusty, so yeah, show me. That's when you take out a piece of paper and you draw a line right down the middle of it and put list side on the left, sell side on the right. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you are on the list side. Your buyer is going to be on the sell side. A typical real estate transaction, the commissions are split 50-50. With a discount broker, most of the time, but not all the time, the commissions aren't split 50-50. They're split 1% on the listing side and 3% on the buyer side. Now, you can use the previous objection handling technique that I just showed you a moment ago and explain to them that the lower commission on the selling broker side is not going to compete as well against the higher commissions on the selling broker side. We've already proven that a moment ago. But the other objection handling technique that you can use is you can say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, understand that this is a business. It costs money for listing agents like me and all the other listing agents in the City of Columbia to advertise, market, and promote property. And the more money I've got to do that with, the more advertising and promotion and marketing I can do. It's a physical business decision. It takes a whole lot more than just sticking a sign up in the front yard and putting a home in the multiple listing service to get it sold. You have to explain that to them. They don't do this for a living like you and I do. But isn't it logical that the less money that you have to spend on the listing side for marketing, advertising, and promotion, then the less marketing, advertising, and promotion you're going to be able to do? Doesn't that make sense? Yeah, Rusty, that makes sense. So less marketing means less exposure, means less buyers, means less opportunity to sell. See how I walked them right to that? That's the way you have to explain it to them. That makes sense, doesn't it? That makes a lot of sense, Rusty. So that's another objection handling technique that you can use when they say that another broker is willing to list it for a lower commission, or I want to list it with a discount broker because the reason is the same, I need to net more. Now, my contact information is going to be on these slides. If you want to contact me later, you can reach my contact information on my website too at rustyjohnson.com. You can call me up, take me to lunch, and I'll show you how I get 8% on most of mine. There's a reasonable, logical reason why it will save, listen to this carefully, it will save the client money by listing at a higher commission. Can you imagine the objection handling track on that? What if I show you by listing at a higher commission you'll actually save money? Would you do it? Well, how are you going to do that? No. Me first. Well, yeah, if you can show me that, and if you'll take me to lunch, I'll show you how to do it. I'm happy to share it with you. Okay? All right, let's talk about the one that's number 4 that says, we have friends in the business. Oh, this is one of my favorite ones. Because remember, you've already gone through your entire listing presentation with them. You spent an hour and a half away from your family. You spent all that time developing your market analysis and your presentation, and you're there at 7:30 at night when you should be eating dinner. And the first thing they say is, after you do all of this presentation and they like you, and they like your company and what you do and what your company offers, and they say, well, Rusty, we've got friends in the business. Don't you just want to say, well, why am I here? I know I want to say that sometimes because they wait and say that at the end. That's why it's an objection, okay? But there's a fear associated with that, right? So here's how you handle it. Remember the track. What's the first thing? I agree, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Let me tell you guys something from the heart, okay? I hope every one of my friends calls me when they get ready to sell their home, right? That's good loyalty. It kills me when I see one of my friends has listed their home with another company. I thought you were my friend. See? Don't that make you feel bad? It's because you wasn't keeping in touch with them. That's why they did that. But my point is that when they say that, you have to come up with a legitimate, logical, honest reason to get them to list with you. The way you do that is this. I agree. I hope all my friends list with me. Just so that I'm clear, you want to list with your friend for what reason? Well, I have loyalty, or I want to give them a chance. They're new in the business. I want to give them some business. I want to give them an opportunity. They're going to give you the reason, okay? But whatever their reason is, your track does not change. Your track is the same. What if I show you, by listing with your friend in the business, that the home probably won't sell? Would you still want to do that? Well, Rusty, how are you going to do that? You don't know my friend. No, I don't know your friend. But if I show you where listing with your friend the home might not sell, would you still want to do it? Well, no. We've got to move. We have to move. So show me. Here's how you show them. And here's what I want you to say. I want you to look the seller right in the eye, and I want you to say, can you fire your friend? And wait for an answer. Wait for an answer. Can you fire your friend? Because here's what I've learned after 17 years in the real estate business, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. You're going to be a little easier on your friend to abide by all the things necessary to get this home sold. And if they drop the ball or they slide on some things or you let them slide on some things, you're probably not going to hold them to the same standard. Well, let me explain something to you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. You can fire me. You can fire me. As a matter of fact, one of the presentation pieces that I have, and if you want a copy of this, just email me. I'll be happy to send it to you. I have a seller cancellation guarantee that I lay out on the table when they say, no, we want to hire a friend. Well, you can fire me. I've got a piece of paper called a seller cancellation guarantee, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. It says if I don't do my job, you've got advance permission to fire me. I call it my get out of jail free card. You can fire me. That's one of the objection handling techniques that you can use when they say we want to list it with a friend or we have friends in the business. Can you fire your friend? Because you can fire me. That makes sense, doesn't it? Well, yeah, we got to get it sold and we can't let them slide, but the tendency is going to be to let them slide because they're your friend, right? Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that logical? Here's the other one that you can use. I agree, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I want all my friends to list their homes with me too. Just so I understand, you want to list to your friends because you got good loyalty. Is that right? Personal friends. I hope all my friends list with me. What if I show you by listing with your friend it probably won't sell? Would you still want to do that? How are you going to do that? No, me first. If I show you, will you list with me? Well, yeah, we got to move, so show me. Here's how you show them. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let me ask you this. I know that after being in real estate for 17 years, that selling your home involves sharing a lot of personal information. For example, the most personal piece of information that a seller shares with me is their mortgage loan balance, right? Can you share your mortgage loan balance with your friend? I have seller clients that have hired me in the past that are selling their home because of grave personal situations, such as divorce, for example. Is it okay to share with your friend that you and your husband or you and your wife are getting a divorce? Is that okay? Well, not really. We really didn't want to share a lot of personal information with our friend. Well, you have to do that when you sell your home. Okay? That makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. So there's a couple of techniques that you can use when they say that they want to hire with a friend or they want to hire their friend. Let's move on to the next one. Rusty, we only want to list our home for 60 days. Oh boy, that's a good one. Everybody in your market, all across the state, you've probably got different average days on the market. In Columbia, South Carolina, here where my fellow Keller Williams agents and I work, we have an average days on the market of 122 days right now. That means from the time the sign goes up to the contract comes in, it takes 122 days. Now, the seller prospects I'm working with don't know that. The main reason that they want to only list with 60 days is probably because they've had a bad experience with another real estate agent. You might be talking to an expired listing, for example. They don't want to be tied into a lengthy agreement, okay? If you don't do your job, if you just stick a sign up in the front yard and disappear. So here's what you say. What do you start with? I agree, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I wouldn't want to be locked into a lengthy agreement for somebody that I've only spent an hour and a half with either, right? So then what do you say? Let me understand. You just don't want to be locked into a lengthy agreement. Is that right? Because Keller Williams Realty, our policy is to list homes for a minimum of 180 days. Now there's a specific reason for that you need to explain to your seller. It's because it takes 121 or 122 days in our market to sell it, another 30 to 45 days to close it. Our company wants the opportunity to get paid for all the marketing that we do, right? That's the business end of it. But here's what you say to the seller. I agree. You just don't want to be locked into a long-term agreement. What if I show you by listing it for only 60 days, it probably won't sell? Would you still want to do that? Well, no, we've got to sell, Rusty. Show me how by listing for only 60 days it's not going to sell. Well, right now, it takes an average of 122 days to get a contract on a home when it's listed by a real estate company in our market. 122 days. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, by only listing it for 60 days, you are handcuffing me, and here's what I do at the table. You are handcuffing me from the beginning. Could it sell in 60 days? Half the time? Well, yeah, it could. A blind squirrel gets a nut every now and then. It could, but it's not likely, right? Statistically, it's not likely to sell. And I have to be honest with you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's going to be very difficult for me to convince my broker to agree to take this listing with only half the time. That makes sense, doesn't it? The other thing that you can do, and again, if you'll email me, I'll send you a copy of this. You can lay the cancellation guarantee on the table. Works like a charm. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I understand you don't want to be locked into a lengthy agreement. Although the Keller-Williams policy is 180 days for a minimum listing agreement, you're only tied to Rusty Johnson for 24 hours at a time. Now, let me give you the dialogue that I want you to use with this seller cancellation guarantee if you email me and request it, okay? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I've never wanted to work for somebody that didn't think I was doing my dead level best to get the home sold. I'm not going to get referrals that way. How many referrals am I going to get from a seller if I compel you to work with me when you don't like me? How many? Zero. None. You lay that cancellation guarantee on the table and say, I know you don't want to be locked into a lengthy agreement. I know that you felt like you were in a prison. You're not going to be that way with me. I'll let you out. I don't want to work with people, and I don't want to compel people to work with me who don't think I'm doing a good job. It's not a great way to get referrals. And that's another technique that you can use to help them reduce the fear of listing a long-term agreement with you when they had a bad experience with somebody else before. Okay? How long have you been in the business? How many agents out there on the website right now or on the webinar right now have only been in the business a year or less? Let me see your hands. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Here's what I want you to do with that. When they say, how long have you been in the business, and you say, I've only been in the business a year, and they go, I'm fixing to turn over 7% of the sale price of my house to somebody that's only been in the business for a year. Well, that's only if it sells, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Did I say that out loud? What I want you to say is this. Start off with the same track. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I agree with you. Just so that I understand, the reason you have a fear of listing with a new agent is because, and they're going to tell you the same thing. They're all going to tell you the same thing. It's because you haven't been in the business very long. You're not as experienced. You don't have as much techniques and marketing expertise to get the home the exposure it's going to need to get sold. Doesn't matter what they say. Let them rant. Okay? And here's what you say. What if I show you, by listing with this 1-year agent, you'll get more service than any other agent in the city? Will you list with me? You have to do that. I know that pegs the guts meter. I know it does. You've put them in a corner because it's an obvious answer question. They're cornered. They're going to say, well, you got me cornered. Well, how are you going to do that? No, me first. If I show you why by listing with this 1-year agent that you're going to get twice the service than any other agent in the city, will you still list with me? Make them say yes. Well, yeah, show me. This is my favorite. This is how you do it. When you've only got one listing, how much time do you have to market that listing? 12 hours a day. Every day. You're the only listing client I've got. I'm going to be, here's the dialogue, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to be the Doberman pincher on the front lawn getting this home sold. You're my only client. I don't have anybody else. You can call me 24/7. Here's my number. What client is not going to want that? You with me? What client is not going to want 24/7 access to you and you be their only client? They're all going to want that. You just have to be the 1-year agent or the 2-year agent that's brave enough to point it out to them. and then prove it to them. Remember, none of this can be proven. You've only been there an hour and a half. It takes time to prove to them that you're going to do what you say you're going to do and thus have integrity. I call that integrity, doing what you say you're going to do. Like I did, put your marketing plan in writing. Put your cancellation guarantee in writing. If I don't do these things, you can fire me. Here's the document. I have to sign it. You have to sign it. My broker has to sign it. If you've only been in the business a short period of time, I envy you. I actually envy you. You've got more time. They'll want to list with you because they're going to be your only client. Now let's talk about the last one, then I can answer some questions. We want to think about it. That's the stalls we talked about. The guy sitting there, like the thinker on the chair. We want to wait. We want to think about it. Now, if you don't get one of the specific ones related to money or time in the business or a family friend, okay, then you're going to get this one. Because it's probably the last-ditch effort of that seller to get you out of the house. Because that's what they're wanting to do. They really don't want to make this decision. You're forcing them to make a decision that they inherently don't want to make. It's a lot of pressure. They're still feeling like something is what? Unanswered. They have a fear that they've missed something. So here's your track. What do you start with? I agree. It's a big decision. Just so I understand, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the reason you want to wait is, and make them tell you. Well, we just need to think about it a little bit more. It's simply going to be something vague. Okay? Well, let me ask you this, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. What if I show you that by waiting, we may never have a chance to get this home sold and get you to your point that you're going to make sure that you reference why they're selling to begin with, reintroduce their motivation, never have the chance to get you to Nashville on time to start this new job. How are you going to do that, Russ? No. If I show you that, will you still want to wait? Well, no, if you show me something that's logical, if you show me something that's legitimate, not trying to trick me, you're honest, show me. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's your dialogue. I understand this is a big decision. I understand you don't know me. I understand you don't know that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do here at the table in the hour and a half we've spent together. I understand that. I get that. Here's my cancellation guarantee. If I don't, you can fire me. Here's my promise to you that my business model for 17 years that I've been in the real estate business is not to get a commission, but to get a referral. And here's my promise to you that I'm not going to sit here and compel you to make a decision you're not ready to make. But by token of 17 years in the business, I know that because you want to wait, it's because I have what? Left something unanswered. You've got to say that. It making you the bad guy. It's my fault. It's my fault. I have a Mac Daddy listing presentation, but I've left something out. And I've done hundreds of listing presentations, but I've left something out. Please, look them right in the eye. Please, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, tell me what it is, because I want to help you. I think you agree that I'm the man for the job. I think you agree that Keller Williams Realty is the company for the job. If you'll tell me what it is, I promise that I'll make you feel comfortable with me and the company and what we're going to do to get you to Nashville on time. And let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, realtors of the state of South Carolina, this is your last-ditch effort because I don't want you to make them sign if they're not ready. I don't want you to do it. You'll be just like the rest of the salespeople out there. You're not a salesperson. You're a realtor. Be a professional. Don't compel them to do something they're not ready to do. Okay? If they will give you a legitimate fear that they have that you have accidentally left off in your presentation, then you need to answer that fear. You need to let them feel comfortable, or else they won't sign. If they have some other reason that you don't have an answer to, let me get the answer to that, and I will come back. Always get another time. Always. That's a good question. I can tell that that's something that's important to you. Let me get you an answer to that question, and let me come back tomorrow night at 7 and provide you with that answer. Not over the phone. You get that? Not over the phone. I'm coming back because I need you to sign. Don't say that. But I need you to sign, and I'll answer that question in person. Okay, Rusty, here's our concern. Come back at 7 tomorrow, and then you'll get it. Then you'll get it. But the bottom line to all of this, folks, is I don't want you trying to compel somebody to do something that they're not ready to do. Okay? I want to thank you guys for taking your lunch hour on St. Patrick's Day to spend some time with me today. I sincerely hope that I've given you some techniques today and a track for handling objections and stalls that you're inevitably going to get. Please feel free to contact me later if you don't have enough time today to answer all of your questions. Please feel free to contact me later. One of my biggest joys in life is being able to share with other real estate agents what I've done to become successful in the real estate business. I live and breathe for it. It's why I joined Keller Williams, because of my intention is to become a trainer for the company. So if you have any questions whatsoever right now, I'll be glad to answer them. And if you have any questions later, you can either email me at rusty@rustyjohnson.com or contact me through my website. You had a question. What's your question?
My question is, they want a higher price.
Mm-hmm.
They want 202. So
Right. That's right.
Hey,
Yes.
and going up to 202 is beneficial.
Right.
But their ultimate goal is to
Net to them,
net.
not just raising it in price.
Right.
Well, here's the dialogue that I use for that. The market analysis that you prepare for a seller client is based on historical data. Has no bearing on what it may sell for later. Yes, I'm sorry, let me repeat the question. She's saying that if I have a seller prospect that wants a higher net proceeds from the sale, they want a higher dollar value for the house, instead of raising it to 202, which nets them the 2,000 they say they want, would we be willing to raise it a little bit higher in the hopes that an offer comes in and still nets them what they need to net? Did I read that right?
Yes, but when you
And she's also saying that because I know that on the market analysis I'm getting an average value of $200,000 by raising it, it's probably not going to sell for that and still net them what they need to net. The answer to that question is two things. One is the market analysis that you prepare for a seller client is based on historical data. It really only gives you a ballpark idea of what it's going to sell for later. The second thing is that I've learned in 17 years in the business that there's always a range in value for every house. It's going to be ranging anywhere from plus or minus 5% based on the condition of the home, not just the recent sales in the area. If I walk into a house and it's a Mac Daddy house that's pristine, looks like it belongs in the cover of Better Homes and Garden, I'm not going to have any problem at all bumping the price 5%. Not any problem at all. And the third thing is that you do need to explain to the seller client that it is based on the sales price, not the list price, and that's ultimately up to them. If they still don't net what they need to net based on an offer when it comes in, then they're going to need to counter it. But your commission stays the same. Stand up for your commission. I'm big on that. Always big on that. And here's the last thing. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, and I want you to use this dialogue too. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'd rather you have a dozen offers you turn down because they're too low than no offer at all because you're above some ceiling of market value that's determined by the other agents representing buyers out there. I'd rather you turn them all down. Let's get something on paper that gets the negotiation ball rolling. But if it takes an extra 5% for me to get a listing after I've got there, I've spent time away from my family, that 5% is not going to keep you from getting it, especially if it's a Mac Daddy house. Do we have another one? Oh my gosh. That's good, Joey. That's good. The answer is yes. You send me lunch money, and you can call me on my cell phone, which is also listed in one of the slides, and I will tell you how to get 8%. Yes. Love to do it. Love to do it. Love people telling me, God, Rusty, I got one at 8%. It was easy. Really? Amazing. What's another one? Got another one? Okay. Hey, Dennis Ramirez is tuning in. Hey, Dennis, how you doing? Good to see you, buddy. Dennis is my buddy. Can you click over to one of those slides that I've got, the very first picture slide? I was down to 5 points getting gas the other day, And this is the price of gas now. In 5 Points, downtown. I thought gas was expensive till I saw that. Go to the next one. Oh, this one. This is the one that you feel like when they say we've got a friend in the business. Really? Why am I here? Does this remind you of anybody else that's been in the headlines lately? Some sort of warlock with tiger blood dripping from his fangs? Anybody you recognize? No? Okay. What's the next one? Oh, yeah. You can use these slides, by the way, in your listing presentation if it helps you. I want you to put them in your presentation and lay them out on the table when you're talking to your seller prospect. This is the one that you tell them when they flip out the first objection. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to be honest with you. Flip that out. And it reminds you to be honest, too. Don't try to trick them. And what's the last one? Oh, yeah. This is the one that says, we want to wait. Tell you what I'm going to do, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I'm going to take this tent, pitch it on the front lawn. You come knock on the flat when you're ready. Put that in your presentation. You got to add a little levity to these presentations because remember, they're fearful, right? That's the only reason they're throwing these objections out is because they have a genuine fear. Flip those out and go, this is no big deal. I can solve this for you. I can make this easy for you. I'll just pitch this on the front lawn. You come knock on the flat when you're ready. Like that? Did Sherry have her hand raised? No? Okay. Well, gosh, I can't believe my whole presentation covered everything except how to do 8%. That's going to cost you. But that's okay. It's just lunch. Everybody's got to eat. Yes, Gary? Is if I have a client that's asking me to list a property for $10,000 more than I firmly believe, Gary, then I firmly believe it's going to sell for. Even if I maximize it because of condition on the appraised value, plus or minus 5%, if they still want $10,000 more than that, what do you do? I've got a great answer to that question. Thank you for asking that. The answer is this. As I said a moment ago, you at some point have to make a business decision on how much higher you're going to be willing to go and spend your money up front in advance to market, advertise, and promote a property in advance in the hopes that it sells and appraises so it closes and you get paid back, right? And everybody's going to have a different threshold for that. But here's the dialogue that I use. The dialogue I use is this. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, did I mention I work on commission? I want to try to sell it for as much as possible. I'll make more money. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to touch the mic. I'll make more money. You'll make more money. Guarantees a referral. But I am at the mercy of the market. You, as the seller of this home, are at the mercy of the market. Remember, I'm the king of adding levity. Here's your levity. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, did I mention that we have a listing contest at my office at Keller Williams every month? If we're going to overprice it, let's put it at $1 million. At least I'll get free lunch with the broker today. Okay. I want to list it for as high as possible too, but I'm just telling you that I don't think we can effectively get it to appraise for that. Now, if you end up making that business decision not to take that listing, you should probably still keep an eye on it because if they do list it with somebody else at that higher price, you may find it on the hot sheet 3 months from now, 6 months from now, as a withdrawn or expired listing, and then the seller may be a little softer and more willing to listen to reason because they had to learn for themselves that you were right, that maybe that wasn't a good price to put it at. I do that. I keep an eye on them. If I missed one, if I spent time away from my family and I was at the appointment for an hour and a half and I didn't get it, I'd just kind of like to know who did. And if it sold, then maybe my bad, because sometimes it sells and appraises. I get shocked by that all the time. Yes, next question. That's a good question too. Joey, the first answer to that question is don't tell them how many listings you have. No, seriously. The one thing that I have a great advantage of, Joey, is I have assistants that work with me. I have 2 assistants that work with me. That is the only way that I have the ability to point out to them that I can handle a higher volume of business. If I had to do what I'm carrying 24 listings myself right now. If I had to handle all of that by myself without the 2 assistants that I have, I wouldn't sleep at night. I'd be 24/7 all the time. But it's important for you during your listing presentation, if they've seen advertisements for you in one of the magazines or in the newspaper or on Realtor.com, they looked you up and looked at your accolades and your achievements, or they go to your website and they see how many listings you've got now and they go, Rusty, I've got a little bit of concern about how many listings you've got. Remember the first thing on the track? Agree. I agree, that's a lot of listings to have to keep up with. And number 2 is, just so I can understand, you're worried about me having so many listings, maybe I don't get to spend as much time with you as you'd need. What if I show you I can give you all the attention you need, will you list with me? Find out what level of attention they need, and then if you really want that listing, be prepared to adjust your listing activity plans to get that listing sold to accommodate them with the amount of attention that they need. If it's a really great listing, I don't mind calling them every week and letting them know what we're doing to get it sold. I have no problem with that. Either I'll call them or my assistant will call them. That's a good question. I get that occasionally, but when you tell them you have a team, you're not just a one-man show, then that helps them understand you can delegate. Yes?
Going back to Gary's question.
Yeah, that's a good question. She's asking, based on Gary's question a moment ago, she's asking if I ever agreed to take a listing at $10,000 more than I thought it would sell for, or more than I thought it was worth, would I go ahead and get a listing price reduction in advance? The answer to that question is absolutely yes. If I'm going to give them something, they're going to give me something. Okay, you don't have a real motivation to sell or an urgency to sell. You just want to sell. You don't need to sell. Okay, I could use the sign calls, ad calls, and internet inquiries from your listing. Fine. We'll list it for $310,000. That's fine, but I want a 3 to 5% price reduction in 2 weeks or 4 weeks max. Max. If I'm not getting any offers on it or if I'm not getting any showings on it. Now, if I give you this, you're going to have to give me that. That makes sense, doesn't it? And they'll usually do it, especially if they don't have the supreme urgency and motivation to move or to sell. Any other questions? Jackie, why don't I let you just teach the course?
Is your way for showing that if you're competing with
a discount broker?
yeah.
Okay.
And they say, well, and it's part of your objection.
I don't have an objection to that.
Well, not an objection, but
Let me answer. Let me rephrase that question. She's asking, is one of my objection handling techniques when a seller prospect says we want to list with a discount broker? Do I ever say, well, it may end up costing you more money in the long run because it's just going to sit here and that's more payments that you're going to make? There's a version of that I use, yes. And it's the 60-day guarantee that I have. That's one of my unique value propositions, is that I'll sell a home in 60 days or less at a price acceptable to the seller, or I will pay them $1,000 in cash at the closing. Buy me lunch and I'll tell you how to do that too. The point is that if it does sit there additional months on the market, they are going to make more house payments, and in the long run, they may have eventually spent the whole 7% that they could have spent in the beginning and hired me and sold it in 122 days. Yes, valid point. That is an objection handling technique that I use sometimes when they want to hire a discount broker, but sometimes when they just want to do anything related to a reduced commission or a higher price. It's going to sit here longer, you're going to pay more payments, and you're going to end up paying it anyway. It's like the old Fram oil filter commercials. You can pay it now or you can pay it later. Either way, you're going to pay it. Does that make sense? That's a good question, too. Is that it? Thanks again for coming. Hope I get to see you again soon. Call me if I can help you.